They pull away the moment it starts to feel real, and that is the part that breaks you the most. Because it was not always like this. There was warmth. There was connection. There were moments that felt almost too perfect to question. The way they looked at you, the way conversations flowed without effort, the quiet sense that something meaningful was growing between you. And then something shifted. Not loudly, not clearly, just enough for you to feel it. Messages slowed down. Energy changed. That closeness you felt so deeply suddenly turned into distance you could not explain. And now you are left sitting in that silence, trying to understand what went wrong. Your mind starts racing. Was it something you said? Something you did? Did you come on too strong? Did you care too much? And the hardest part is this. There was no clear ending, no real explanation, just a slow, confusing pull away that leaves you questioning your worth in ways you never expected. You replay every moment. You look for clues. You search for meaning in their silence, because silence feels like rejection when you do not understand it. But stay with me, because what comes next will completely change how you see this. Most people will never understand this truth, not because it is hidden, but because they react too quickly to the pain and never stay long enough to see what is really happening underneath. Here is where things begin to shift. That distance you feel, it is not always about losing interest. It is not always about you not being enough. And it is definitely not as simple as them not caring. In fact, the moment they start pulling away is often the exact moment something deeper begins inside them. And that is the part no one talks about. You are told to move on. You are told they are not worth it. You are told to forget them. And sometimes that is the right path. But before you accept any of those answers, you deserve to understand what is really happening behind that emotional wall. Because when you understand it, everything changes. You stop blaming yourself. You stop chasing answers that only create more confusion. And you begin to see the situation from a place of calm instead of pain. There is a hidden pattern behind why avoidant people pull away right when things start to feel meaningful. A pattern rooted in fear, not indifference. A pattern that creates distance even when part of them does not want to let go. And here is the truth that may surprise you. When they pull away, they are not only reacting to you, they are reacting to something much deeper within themselves. Something they often do not even have the words to explain. That is why their behavior feels so confusing. One moment they are close, open, connected, and the next it feels like they disappeared into a version of themselves you do not recognize. It leaves you feeling powerless because you cannot fix something you do not understand. But what if their silence is not rejection, but something else? What if, in that distance, there is actually a quiet expectation, an unspoken hope, something they are waiting to see from you, not through words, not through effort, but through something much deeper? And this is where your power begins. Because the way you respond in this moment, the way you handle their distance, will shape everything that happens next. It will either push them further away or create the space where something real can return. But almost no one gets this right, not because they are weak, not because they are wrong, but because the instinct to chase, to fix, to hold on tighter, feels like love. And yet, that very instinct can become the reason the distance grows even wider. So in this video, you are going to understand exactly what is happening when an avoidant pulls away, what they are secretly hoping you will do, and how to respond in a way that protects your peace while shifting the entire dynamic. You are going to see the truth behind their silence. You are going to learn the mistake that almost everyone makes in this moment. And most importantly, you are going to discover a way to stand in your own power, no matter what they choose to do next. Because this is not only about them, this is about you reclaiming control over your emotions, your energy, and your self-worth. And by the end of this, something inside you will feel different, clearer, stronger, more grounded. So, if you have been feeling confused, if their distance has been weighing on your mind, if you are searching for answers that actually make sense, you are exactly where you need to be. Welcome to the channel, and if this message resonates with you, take a moment to subscribe, because what you are about to understand next might be the shift you did not even know you needed. They do not pull away because they feel nothing. They pull away because they feel too much, and they do not know how to hold it. That is the part that rarely gets said out loud. From the outside, it looks cold, it feels distant, it even feels careless at times. But inside them, it is not calm, it is not empty, it is overwhelming. Emotions do not come to them in a steady, safe way. They come all at once, intense and unfamiliar, like a wave they were never taught how to swim in. And instead of leaning in, their instinct is to step back, to create space, to breathe again. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. They assume distance means disinterest. They assume silence means the connection was never real. But for someone with an avoidant pattern, closeness itself can feel like a threat, even when they genuinely care. It triggers something deep inside them, not logic, not choice, but a quiet fear they have carried for a long time, a fear of losing themselves. Because to them, love is not just connection. It feels like pressure, like expectation, like slowly being consumed by something they cannot control. The closer they get, the more they feel that sense of losing independence, losing the part of them that feels safe when they are alone. And here is something most people do not know. Studies in attachment psychology show that avoidant individuals often have lower tolerance for emotional closeness, not because they lack feelings, but because their nervous system becomes overstimulated by intimacy itself. It is not about you being too much. It is about their system not knowing how to stay regulated when things start to feel real. So when they pull away, it is not always a decision, it is a reaction. And that is where the contradiction lives. Part of them wants connection. Part of them craves it more than they will ever admit. But another part of them fears what comes with it, so they move closer. And then they retreat. They open up, and then they shut down. They make you feel chosen, and then they disappear just enough to make you question everything. And in the middle of that, you are left trying to make sense of something that was never clearly expressed. This is why it hurts so deeply, because you felt something real, and you were not wrong for feeling it. There was a connection, there was meaning, there was something genuine in those moments of closeness. But what you did not see was the internal conflict happening at the same time. The quiet tension between wanting love and fearing it. And that tension does not make them bad, but it also does not make the pain disappear, because understanding them does not mean you have to lose yourself in the process. It just means you stop taking their behavior personally in a way that slowly breaks your confidence. It means you begin to see that their distance is not a reflection of your value, but a reflection of something unresolved within them. And once you truly see that, something inside you begins to shift. You stop chasing clarity from someone who cannot even explain their own emotions. You stop trying to prove your worth to someone who is not questioning your worth, but their own ability to handle closeness. But here is where it gets even deeper, because their fear is not just about losing independence. It is also about what happens if they stay, if they fully open, if they finally let someone in. That is the part they never say. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this. But it changes everything. Why does everything fall apart right when it starts to feel right? That question sits heavy because the timing makes no sense. Things were building. Conversations felt deeper. There was a sense of ease, a quiet rhythm forming between you and them. You started to feel safe. You started to believe this might actually become something real. And then, without warning, the shift happens, not when things are broken, but when they are finally starting to come together. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. They think the problem began at the moment of distance. But the truth is, the trigger happened at the moment of closeness. When the connection crossed a certain emotional depth, something inside them reacted automatically, not consciously, not intentionally, but powerfully enough to change everything. Because for someone with avoidant patterns, deeper connection does not always register as safety. It often registers as risk. And here is something most people never hear. Research in attachment theory suggests that avoidant individuals can experience a spike in internal stress hormones when intimacy increases. Even if they genuinely like the person, their body begins to associate emotional closeness with loss of control, even when nothing threatening is actually happening in the present moment. So when things start to feel good, really good, their system does not relax. It tightens. This is where past wounds quietly take over, not as clear memories, but as patterns, emotional imprints from earlier experiences where closeness may have led to disappointment, pressure, or a loss of self. And instead of thinking it through, their system reacts by creating distance before things go too far. That is why the shift feels so confusing to you, because from your perspective, everything was finally aligning. From their perspective, everything was becoming too real. And real feels dangerous when you have never learned how to feel safe inside it. This creates the emotional arc you have been living through without even realizing it. Hope when the connection starts to deepen, confusion when their energy suddenly changes, and then quiet withdrawal, where you are left trying to hold on to something that is slowly slipping away. And in that silence, your mind turns inward. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I said the wrong thing. Maybe I cared more than they did. But here is the truth nobody says out loud. You were never broken. You were never too much. You were never the reason they pulled away. Their distance was not a response to your need static. It was a response to their own internal threshold being crossed. And that changes everything. Because it means the connection did not end because it lacked something. It paused because it reached something. It became real. And real is exactly what triggers the fear they are trying so hard to avoid. That is why you can feel the contradiction so strongly. They were there. They were present. They showed you something genuine, and then they pulled back as if it never mattered. But it did matter. It mattered enough to scare them. And that is a painful truth to hold, because it does not give you control. It does not give you a clear action to fix it. It simply asks you to see the situation differently, to stop measuring your worth based on their withdrawal, to stop rewriting the story in a way that makes you the problem. Because the moment you understand this, something inside you starts to release. The grip of overthinking loosens. The need for answers softens, and in its place a new kind of awareness begins to grow. But this is where things take an unexpected turn, because their distance is not just a reaction, it is also, in a strange and quiet way, a test. Not one they planned, not one they would ever admit, but one that reveals more about the future of this connection than anything else. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this, but it changes everything. What if their silence is not just distance, but a quiet test you did not even know you were taking? It does not look like a test. There are no rules, no clear questions, no moment where they tell you what is happening. But the moment they pull away, something subtle begins. They step back, and from that distance, they start observing, not in a calculated or manipulative way, but in a deeply unconscious one. They want to see what happens next, without asking for it directly. Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. Because the instinct in this moment feels almost impossible to control. You feel the shift, and your body reacts before your mind can catch up. The urge to reach out, the need to fix it, the pull to close the gap they just created. It feels like if you do not act, you will lose them, and so you start typing messages you later overthink. You replay conversations, you try to bring things back to how they were, and without realizing it, you step into the very dynamic that pushes them further away. Here is something surprising that most people never realize. Psychologically, when an avoidant person creates distance, they often become more aware of your emotional responses than when they are close to you. Space sharpens their perception. They notice tone shifts, energy changes, patterns of reaching out. It is not that they are ignoring you. It is that they are watching from a place where they feel safer. And what they are sensing is not just your words. It is your emotional state. Are you anxious? Are you chasing? Are you trying to pull them back in? Or are you grounded, steady, centered within yourself? This is where the silent tension builds, because part of you wants to hold on. That is natural, that is human. You felt something real, and you do not want to lose it. But another part of you, a quieter, deeper part, knows that chasing will not bring them closer. It will only make the distance feel heavier. And that internal conflict is exhausting. You sit there, holding your phone, thinking about what to say, wondering if silence means strength or if it means letting go, trying to find the perfect balance between caring and not overwhelming, between showing interest and protecting your dignity. And the truth is, there is no perfect message that solves this. Because this moment is not about saying the right thing. It is about becoming the kind of person who does not lose themselves when someone else pulls away. Here is the truth. Nobody says out loud, you were never chasing them. You were chasing the feeling you had when they were close. And that is why it feels so hard to let the space exist. But for them, that space is exactly where they feel safe enough to process everything they are feeling. So while you are trying to close the distance, they are trying to understand it. And this is where everything begins to shift, because when you stop reacting from panic, when you resist the urge to chase, when you allow space without collapsing into it, something unexpected happens. The dynamic changes, not loudly, not instantly, but in a way they can feel. They start to sense that you are not trying to control them, that you are not dependent on their presence to feel stable, that your energy remains steady even when they step back, and that creates something they are not used to: safety. But almost no one reaches this point because the fear of losing them takes over before the shift can happen. And that is exactly why this next part matters more than anything else. Because once you understand what they are secretly hoping you will do in this moment, everything about your response becomes clear. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this, but it changes everything. What are they secretly hoping you will do when they pull away and say nothing? It is not what your instincts are telling you. It is not more messages. It is not emotional explanations. It is not trying harder to prove how much you care. In fact, the more you try to pull them closer in that moment, the more something inside them begins to resist. Not because you are wrong for caring, but because pressure feels overwhelming to someone who already struggles with closeness. Do not skip this part, because this is where everything changes. Because beneath their silence, there is an unspoken hope, not clearly formed, not something they would ever admit out loud, but it is there. Quiet, subtle, powerful. They are hoping you stay calm. They are hoping you do not panic. They are hoping you remain grounded in yourself, even when they are not giving you certainty. And that feels almost unfair when you are the one sitting in confusion, when you are the one feeling the distance, when you are the one trying to understand what just happened. But this is where the dynamic reveals itself in the clearest way, because for them, emotional chaos feels like danger. And here is something most people never realize. Avoidant individuals often associate intense emotional reactions with loss of control, not connection. Even if those reactions come from love, their system interprets it as something that will trap them, overwhelm them, or demand more than they feel capable of giving. So when you respond with anxiety, with urgency, with a need for answers, it confirms the very fear that caused them to pull away in the first place. Not because you are wrong, but because it matches the pattern they are trying to escape. And this is where the paradox begins. The more space you allow, the safer they feel. The calmer you become, the more they can breathe. The less you chase, the less they feel the need to run. It goes against everything your emotions are telling you to do. Because your heart wants closeness, your mind wants clarity, your instincts want to fix what feels like it is slipping away. But the truth is, this moment is not asking you to hold on tighter. It is asking you to stand still. And that is not weakness. That is power. Because when you stay centered in yourself, when you do not collapse into their absence, when you continue living your life without trying to force a response, something shifts inside you. First, you stop reacting from fear. You stop measuring your worth based on their attention. You stop abandoning yourself just to keep someone else close. And that energy, they can feel it. Even from a distance, it creates something unfamiliar to them, something they are not used to experiencing in relationships. Peace. And peace feels safe. This is the part most people miss. They think attraction is built through effort, through constant communication, through proving how much they care. But for someone who fears closeness, attraction is often rebuilt through space, through emotional steadiness, through the absence of pressure. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. The moment you stop trying to hold them, you stop losing yourself. And that is the moment your energy becomes something they can finally move toward instead of away from. But this is not easy, because there will be moments where silence feels unbearable, moments where you question if doing nothing means losing everything, moments where every part of you wants to break that space, just to feel connected again. And that is where the real transformation happens, not in what you say to them, but in how you hold yourself without them. Because once you master that, the entire dynamic changes in a way you cannot force, only allow. But here is the part that most people are not prepared for. Even when you do everything right, there is one mistake that can undo all of it in an instant. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this, but it changes everything. Why does trying harder often push them further away, even when all you are doing is showing love? Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. It is tempting to text more, to call, to send messages that explain how much you care. It is tempting to demand reassurance, to ask questions, to try to fix what feels broken in the moment. Every instinct screams that if you do not act, you will lose them. And yet, the very effort to hold on tightly often does the opposite. It pushes them deeper into retreat. Here is something most people never realize. Emotional flooding is real, and it affects people differently. For someone with an avoidant attachment pattern, high emotional intensity, even from someone they love, is interpreted by their nervous system as a threat, not to you, not to the relationship, but to themselves. Their brain associates emotional pressure with loss of autonomy. So every message that feels urgent, every expression of panic or desperation, actually confirms the very fear that caused them to pull away in the first place. You are left replaying your actions in your mind. Did I do too much? Did I push them away? And the answer is yes, but not because you were wrong, not because your love was excessive in a moral sense. You were trying to love, but what it created for them felt like pressure. This is where reflection becomes powerful. Look back at the times you reached for connection when they pulled away, the messages sent in anxiety, the need for clarity, the hope that showing how much you care would make them stay. All of these were attempts to protect the bond. All of these were born from a heart that wanted connection. But from their perspective, it was overwhelming. It can feel unfair. You are trying to love, and yet it feels like love is rejected. But here is the gentle truth nobody says out loud. Your love was never the problem. Your intensity was never wrong. It simply did not match the rhythm they needed to feel safe. It became a signal they needed to distance themselves, not from you personally, but from the emotional storm they were not equipped to process. And that is where awareness changes everything. Recognizing this pattern in yourself is the first step toward holding your power instead of letting the fear of losing them drive your actions. You begin to see that reaching out impulsively does not fix the connection. It temporarily soothes your anxiety, and your anxiety, when projected, can feel like pressure, even though it is rooted in care. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. You were never broken. You were never too needy. You were never the reason they ran. You were simply trying to love in the only way you knew, and it accidentally matched their fear instead of their need for safety. And now comes the critical insight. When you stop trying to fix them, when you stop responding from desperation, the dynamic quietly shifts. Space begins to feel safe. Calm becomes magnetic. Presence without pressure creates a doorway for them to return. Not because they were lost, but because they now feel free to move toward you without fear. But here is where most people still stumble. Even when you understand this, there is one final barrier that keeps them away longer than necessary. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this, but it changes everything. What if the moment you stop chasing, everything begins to shift without you saying a word? Do not skip this part, because this is where most people make the biggest mistake. When you move from attachment to self-alignment, something subtle but powerful happens. Your focus turns inward, not as a way to punish them, not as a reaction to hurt, but as a conscious choice to center your life around your own peace, growth, and clarity. This is the point where emotional energy transforms. Instead of feeling frantic, you feel grounded. Instead of longing, you feel steady. Your presence begins to radiate calm without needing external validation, and that calm becomes magnetic in ways you cannot force. Here is something surprising many people overlook. Neuroscience shows that people respond not just to actions, but to energy, the vibrational tone you carry, the mix of confidence, self-respect, and emotional stability signals safety to the subconscious mind of someone with avoidant patterns. They may not consciously realize it, but your steady energy communicates something far more powerful than words ever could. You are whole without them. And that is exactly what creates the shift. As you focus on your own life, invest in your passions, and cultivate your peace, the unconscious tension that once drove them away starts to soften. Your detachment is not bitterness. It is clarity. You are not closing the door out of anger or rejection. You are simply no longer allowing their distance to dictate your emotional state. This subtle transformation creates a kind of quiet power that cannot be ignored. Attraction begins to return, but not because you tried to make it happen. It returns because you are no longer operating from need. And now, the part most people do not notice. Absence speaks volumes. When you are fully present in your own life, the avoidant begins to process something they could not see before. They start noticing the space you occupy without them. They feel your absence as a quiet echo, and in that echo, curiosity is born. They begin to reflect on what was missed. The mind, which once feared closeness, now starts to quietly consider connection. They process emotions that were too intense to face before, but from a distance, they can explore them safely. This creates tension, not the frantic kind, but the quiet, heavy kind that stirs reflection. They wonder, did they really step back? Are you still the same person they knew? Will you still exist in the same way when they return? That uncertainty is exactly where the shift occurs. They are drawn to what feels solid, grounded and self-contained, a mirror of the energy you have cultivated in yourself. Here is the truth nobody says out loud. You were never dependent on them. You were never incomplete. You were always building your own life, even if they could not see it. And in that unseen growth, the invisible attraction begins to emerge. And here is something almost no one talks about. As your energy shifts, they do not rush back immediately. They come slowly, cautiously, testing the waters, trying to gauge whether the person they felt they almost lost is still there. And if that person is unchanged or somehow stronger, that is the moment when all your work, all your grounding, all your alignment matters the most. Their curiosity meets your quiet power, and the dynamic begins to rewrite itself without words, without effort, without chasing. But there is one final piece to understand. One truth that will determine whether they continue to move toward you or retreat again. And what I am about to share next, nobody talks about this, but it changes everything. Everything you just heard, you already knew. Deep inside, you just needed someone to remind you. This journey we walked together was never about them, really. It was about you, about the way you felt when they pulled away, the way your heart raced, the questions that kept you awake at night. We started with confusion, with hurt, with that sharp edge of longing that made you doubt yourself. We moved through understanding the hidden fears they carry, the unconscious tests they put you through, and the mistakes most people make that push them further away. You learned that their silence was not a reflection of your worth, but of their own inability to process closeness. And then something shifted. You saw the power in stepping back, in aligning with your own life, in holding your peace without apology. You discovered that detachment is not coldness, it is clarity. That energy, calm and centered, is magnetic. That absence, when handled with self-respect, gives them the space to reflect and process, to wonder quietly about what they almost lost. Before you go, read this one last thing carefully. This might be the most important thing in this entire video. The ultimate truth is simple, and yet so many of us miss it. You were never meant to chase love. The right connection does not demand that you shrink, that you compromise your peace, or that you bend yourself into someone you are not. The right connection arrives when you are whole, when you are grounded, when you honor your own energy and your own boundaries. Whether they return or not, you have already evolved. You have already transformed in ways that make chasing unnecessary. You have already become the person they and the world cannot ignore. They did not pull away to lose you. They pulled away so you could find yourself. That is the gift hidden inside the pain. That is the shift that transforms desperation into quiet power, confusion into clarity, and longing into strength. So as you step forward from this moment, carry that awareness with you. Carry the knowledge that your value does not depend on their attention, that your presence does not require validation, and that your growth will always speak louder than any message, any chase, any pull. If this message spoke to you, if it opened something inside you that had been waiting for recognition, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Not just for me, but for yourself, for the moments when you need a reminder that you are enough, that your journey matters, and that transformation is already happening within you. And as you go through the rest of your day, remember this: The love you were looking for outside was always meant to be cultivated inside. And now you have everything you need to carry it forward.